Who told you that you were small? We are born with infinite potential. We are born with a roar inside us. But then, the world tells us to be quiet. It tells us to fit in, to follow the herd, and slowly, piece by piece, we forget who we truly are. We start to believe we are weak. We start to believe the stories they tell us. But what if the only thing keeping you from your power is a case of mistaken identity? This was the tragedy of Ari. In a sun-drenched valley, nestled among soft green hills, lived a flock of sheep, and with them lived Ari to the eye. Ari was a magnificent young lion. His muscles were powerful, his frame was large, and his claws were like sharpened daggers hidden in velvet paws. But Ari did not know this. He had been raised by the sheep since he was a cub, found alone and adopted by a kind away. He had learned their ways. He lived their life, and it was slowly destroying him. He tried to communicate, but when he opened his mouth to bleat back, a strangled guttural sound came out, frightening the other sheep and shaming him into silence. He tried to eat what they ate. He would lower his massive head and chew on blades of grass, but the green pulp would only make him sick and weak. His stomach ached constantly, a dull, persistent protest against a diet that was not meant for him. He lived in a state of perpetual fear. A jackrabbit darting from a bush would make him tremble. His own powerful shadow, stretching long in the afternoon sun, would send his heart racing. He was, by far, the strongest creature in the entire valley, a true apex predator. Yet, he felt like the weakest. He moved with a timid shuffle, trying to make himself smaller, trying to blend in. Ari was living a life that was far too small for his soul, and the contradiction was crushing him. One afternoon, as the flock grazed peacefully, a great shadow fell over them. It was sudden and absolute. The sheep, in a panic, scattered in every direction, their terrified bleats echoing across the valley. But Ari did not run. He froze, his limbs locked, his body paralyzed by a fear so profound it stole the air from his lungs. On the ridge above, silhouetted against the bright sky, stood the source of the shadow. It was a lion, a massive, old lion king, his mane a dark wreath around a face etched with the scars of 100 battles. His amber eyes, wise and fierce, scanned the fleeing flock. Then they settled on Ari. The old lion did not attack. He didn't snarl or charge. He simply stared. His gaze was not one of aggression, but of deep, profound confusion. He tilted his massive head, trying to understand the impossible sight before him. A lion, a prince of the wild, cowering among sheep. Slowly, with the deliberate, heavy tread of royalty, the old lion began to descend the ridge. He walked directly toward Ari. With every step the old king took, Ari's world shrank until it was nothing but the approaching predator. He squeezed his eyes shut, shaking uncontrollably, his fur bristling with terror. He braced for the end. As the old lion's scent filled the air, a scent of dust and power and wildness, Ari found a tiny scrap of voice. "Please," he whimpered, the sound barely a whisper. "Please, don't eat me. I am just a poor sheep." The old lion stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a low rumble started deep in the old king's chest. It grew and grew until it burst forth as a laugh. It was not a sound of mirth. It was a sound like thunder rolling through the mountains, a sound of pure, astonished disbelief. "A sheep?" the old lion asked, his voice a deep growl that vibrated in Ari's very bones. "You have the body of a king, but the mind of a prey. Before Ari could process the words, he felt a powerful grip on the scruff of his neck. He was not bitten, he was not mauled. He was simply lifted and dragged, his paws scrambling uselessly against the earth. The old lion pulled him away from the meadow, across the rocky ground, until they reached a small, hidden pool of water. The surface was perfectly still, like a sheet of dark glass. "Look," the old lion commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. Ari, still trembling, dared to open one eye. He expected to see the familiar, frightened face of a sheep staring back at him. But that is not what he saw. In the water, he saw a face framed by a burgeoning golden mane. He saw fierce, yellow eyes, wide not with fear, but with shock. He saw a powerful jaw and the glint of sharp teeth. He saw a reflection that was nearly identical to the magnificent, scarred king standing beside him. He stared, unable to comprehend. It was his face, but it was not his face. It was the face of a stranger he had been seeing his entire life without ever truly recognizing. The old lion watched him, his gaze softening slightly. "You are not what you have been told," he said, his voice now calm and steady. "You are what you are. The sheep did not lie to you out of malice. They taught you to be quiet because they were afraid of your roar. They taught you to be small because they were terrified of your power. Their world is too fragile for a king. But you are not one of them. You do not belong in the herd. You belong on the throne." The words struck Ari like a bolt of lightning. The constant sickness from eating grass, the strangled sounds from his throat, the fear that never made sense. It all crashed together in a single blinding moment of clarity. His whole life had been a lie, a performance he didn't even know he was giving. He stared at his reflection, at the lion in the water, and for the first time, he saw himself. The old lion leaned in close, his whiskers brushing Ari's ear. "Roar," he commanded, the word a soft but unbreakable order. Ari tried. He opened his mouth, but only a pathetic, sheep-like bleat escaped. "No," the old lion growled, a flicker of impatience in his eyes. "That is their sound. I want to hear your sound. R-O-A-R. The command was absolute. It bypassed Ari's conscious mind. It bypassed his years of conditioning. It reached deep into his DNA, into the ancient memory of his bloodline. A vibration started deep within his chest. It was not a thought, it was an instinct, an awakening. He opened his mouth wide, and this time he let it out. At first, it was just a squeak, a rusty, unused noise, but then it caught. It grew into a rumble, shaking his own frame, and finally, with a force that seemed to tear out of his very soul, a massive, earth-shaking roar erupted from his lungs. The sound was immense. It blasted across the valley, echoing off the distant mountains. It was a sound of power, of liberation, of birth. And in that single, shattering moment, the fear that had defined his entire existence was incinerated. It vanished like mist in the sun. He was awake. Ari did not return to the flock. He did not go back to say goodbye. That life was over. He now stood on the high ridge, side by side with the old lion, looking down upon the valley. He saw the sheep, now just small white specks in the distance. He looked down at the green grass he used to eat, and without a second thought, he turned and walked away. He walked with a new gait. His paws fell heavy and sure on the earth. His head was held high. His eyes were clear and focused. He was no longer pretending to be small to make others comfortable. He was no longer living a life that was not his own. He was living as the lion he was always meant to be. The moral of this story is that many of us are lions, living as sheep, constrained by the limiting beliefs imposed on us by our world. To find our freedom, we must be brave enough to look into the mirror of truth, recognize our true nature, and find the courage to finally let out our roar. Thanks for watching.